The tall woman stepped off the stagecoach in La Junta, Colorado, and immediately felt every eye in the dusty street turn toward her as she unfolded herself to her full 6 feet and 2 inches, a height that had made her the subject of whispers and cruel laughter in every town she had ever lived. Tessa Whitmore kept her chin up despite the familiar sting of stares, her worn traveling dress doing little to hide the fact that she stood head and shoulders above most men in this frontier town. It was 1878, and she had come west from Pennsylvania with nothing but a trunk of belongings and a letter from her late aunt's lawyer saying she had inherited a small property on the edge of town. The whispers started before she even collected her bags from the coach driver. 2 women in proper bonnets stopped their conversation to gawk, and a group of cowboys leaning against the general store hitching post began nudging each other and pointing. Tessa had learned long ago to ignore such reactions, though they still carved small wounds into her heart every single time. "Good Lord, look at the height on that one of the cowboys said loud enough for her to hear. "She is taller than my horse." His companions erupted in laughter, slapping their thighs as if this was the funniest observation ever made. Tessa felt her cheeks burn but kept her face neutral as she reached for her trunk. The coach driver, a weathered man with kind eyes, helped her lift it down without comment, though even he had to tilt his head back slightly to meet her gaze. "The lawyer's office is just down the main street, miss," he said quietly. "Thompson and Associates. Can't miss it." "Thank you," Tessa replied, her voice steady despite the continued stares and barely concealed snickers following her every movement. She began walking down the dusty street, her trunk heavy in her hands but manageable thanks to years of doing hard work without assistance. The town of La Junta stretched before her, a collection of wooden buildings baking under the intense Colorado sun. The mountains rose in the distance, purple and majestic, promising cooler air in their heights. The Arkansas River ran nearby, giving life to this settlement that served as a junction for travelers and cattle drives heading in all directions. More people stopped to stare as she passed. A group of children playing in the street fell silent, their mouths hanging open. Their mother quickly shooed them inside as if Tessa's height might be contagious. A merchant sweeping his storefront paused mid-sweep to watch her progress down the street. "Never seen a woman so tall," someone muttered. "Ain't natural. Poor thing. No man will ever want her," another voice added with false sympathy. Tessa had heard variations of these comments her entire life. At 13, she had surpassed her father's height. By 16, she towered over every girl and most boys in her school. Her mother had despaired, saying no man wanted to look up at his wife, that it went against the natural order of things. When both her parents died of fever 3 years ago, Tessa had gone to live with her mother's sister in Philadelphia, working as a seamstress despite her height making it difficult to find a comfortable workspace. Her aunt had been kind but realistic, never mentioning marriage or courtship, understanding that Tessa's prospects were limited by her unusual stature. The lawyer's office was exactly where the coach driver said it would be. Tessa pushed open the door, ducking slightly from habit even though the door frame was tall enough to accommodate her. A clerk behind a desk looked up, his eyes widening. "I am Tessa Whitmore," she said before he could comment on her height. "I have an appointment regarding my aunt's estate." The clerk recovered his composure quickly. "Of course, Miss Whitmore, Mr. Thompson is expecting you. Please have a seat." The chair was too small, as chairs always were. Tessa perched on the edge, keeping her back straight, her hands folded in her lap. She had learned to make herself as small as possible in situations like this, though it never really worked. Mr. Thompson emerged from his office moments later, a portly man with spectacles that kept sliding down his nose. To his credit, he barely reacted to her height beyond a slight pause in his stride. "Miss Whitmore, welcome to La Junta. I am sorry for your loss. Your aunt spoke of you often in her letters." "Thank you, sir. I barely knew her, but I appreciate her generosity." They discussed the details of her inheritance in his office. Her aunt had owned a small house at the edge of town with 5 acres of land, a vegetable garden, and a chicken coop. It was not much, but it was more than Tessa had ever owned in her life. The house was hers outright, along with a small sum of money her aunt had saved. "Your aunt was a schoolteacher," Mr. Thompson explained. "Well respected in the community. She never married, chose to focus on educating the children of this town. The school board is actually looking for a new teacher, if you might be interested. Your aunt mentioned in her letters that you were well educated." Tessa considered this. She had completed her schooling and even attended a year of a teaching college before her parents died and money became scarce. "I would be very interested, Mr. Thompson, though I must warn you, people often find my height disconcerting." Mr. Thompson waved a hand dismissively. "Children do not care about such things, and frankly, Miss Whitmore, we need a teacher more than we need to indulge in prejudices. School starts in 3 weeks. That gives you time to settle into your new home and prepare. The position includes a modest salary." They shook hands, and Mr. Thompson provided her with the key to her new home along with directions. As Tessa left the office, she felt a flutter of hope in her chest. Perhaps here, in this frontier town where people had bigger concerns than the height of a schoolteacher, she might finally find a place to belong. The house was a 20-minute walk from the center of town, down a dusty road that led past a few scattered homesteads and toward open prairie. It was a modest structure, wooden with a covered porch and a stone chimney. The afternoon sun painted it golden, and Tessa felt tears prick her eyes at the sight of it. Her own home. A place where she could close the door and escape the stares and whispers. She was fumbling with the key when she heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching. Tessa turned to see a rider coming down the road, sitting easy in the saddle atop a beautiful chestnut mare. As he drew closer, she could make out more details. A man in his mid-20s, wearing a dusty black hat, a worn shirt, and a vest that had seen better days. He had a strong jaw shadowed with stubble and eyes that caught the sunlight. The rider slowed as he approached, and Tessa braced herself for the usual reaction. But instead of staring at her height with shock or amusement, the man simply tipped his hat politely. "Afternoon, miss." "You must be Miss Whitmore. Word travels fast in a small town." "Yes, I am Tessa Whitmore." She waited for the inevitable comment, the awkward pause, the poorly concealed surprise. The man dismounted with fluid grace and walked toward her, leading his horse. As he approached, Tessa realized something unusual. He had to look up to meet her eyes. He was shorter than her by a good 3 inches, perhaps 5'11". Most men found this mortifying, refusing to stand too close to her, always trying to find higher ground to compensate. But this man simply stopped in front of her, looked up with the most genuine smile she had ever seen, and said, "I am Lucas Fletcher. I run the ranch that borders your property to the north. Your aunt was a fine woman and a good neighbor. I am sorry for your loss. Thank you, Mr. Fletcher." He gestured to the house. "If you need any help getting settled, I am happy to lend a hand. The place has been empty for 3 months since your aunt passed. I have tried to keep an eye on it, make sure squatters did not move in, but I have not been inside." Tessa hesitated. She was not used to kindness from men, especially not men who had to tilt their heads back to look at her face. "That is very kind of you, but I can manage." "I am sure you can," Lucas said easily. "But managing and having help are not mutually exclusive. Besides, I should check that the pump is still working properly. I helped your aunt repair it last spring, and these things can be temperamental." There was something warm and genuine in his manner that made Tessa relent. "Very well. I would appreciate that, Mr. Fletcher. Lucas, please. We are neighbors, after all." He helped her carry her trunk inside, and Tessa was grateful for the assistance as her arms ached from carrying it through town. The house was simple but clean, with a main room that served as kitchen and living area, a bedroom, and a small loft space accessible by a ladder. The furniture was basic but well made. A table and chairs, a rocking chair by the fireplace, a bed with a quilt her aunt had apparently stitched herself. Lucas checked the water pump in the kitchen and, after a few experimental pushes, got it flowing smoothly. He inspected the fireplace, tested the windows to make sure they latched properly, and pointed out where her aunt had kept various supplies. "The chicken coop is out back. I have been feeding the chickens and collecting eggs, but they are yours now. 6 good hens. The garden has gotten a bit wild, but it was well established. With some work, you could have vegetables through the fall." Tessa followed him outside, and they walked through the property together. The chicken coop was sturdy, and the hens clucked contentedly in the late afternoon sun. The garden was indeed overgrown, but she could see the bones of something beautiful. Rows of vegetables, herb plants, even a small berry patch. "Your aunt loved this garden," Lucas said quietly. "She would spend hours out here, said it gave her peace." "Did you know her well?" "Well enough. She was a private woman but kind. She would bring me vegetables sometimes, and I would help her with repairs or heavy lifting. She never mentioned having family back east until the end, when she was settling her affairs." They stood in the garden, the sun beginning to lower toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Tessa felt a strange sense of calm in this man's presence. He had not mentioned her height once, had not made her feel like a curiosity or a problem to be solved. "I should let you get settled," Lucas said finally. "But if you need anything, my ranch is just over that ridge." He pointed to a rise in the land to the north. "About a 10-minute walk." "You are welcome any time." "Thank you, Lucas. You have been very kind." He tipped his hat again, and as he mounted his horse, he looked down at her from his saddle and said something that made her heart skip a beat. "Welcome to La Junta, Tessa. I think you are going to like it here." The way he said her name, with such easy familiarity and warmth, made her feel like maybe, just maybe, he was right. That first week in La Junta passed in a blur of activity. Tessa threw herself into making the house truly hers, cleaning every corner, airing out linens, organizing her few possessions. She worked in the garden, pulling weeds and salvaging what she could of the vegetables. The physical work felt good, gave her tired muscles and a sense of accomplishment. She went into town twice for supplies, and each time she endured the stares and whispers. The women at the general store served her, but with tight lips and cold efficiency. The men outside made comments just loud enough for her to hear. "That is the tall woman who inherited the Whitmore place. 6 feet if she is an inch. Unnatural. Shame. She has a pretty enough face, but no man wants to court a woman he has to climb a ladder to kiss." This last comment was followed by raucous laughter that followed Tessa all the way down the street. She kept her head high, her expression neutral, but each comment was a small cut that added to the collection she had been accumulating her entire life. The only bright spot was Lucas. He stopped by every couple of days, always with some plausible reason. He had extra lumber she might need for repairs, or he wanted to check on the chickens, or he had vegetables from his own garden to share. They would talk while they worked, and Tessa found herself looking forward to these visits more than she wanted to admit. Lucas told her about his ranch, a modest operation where he raised cattle and horses with the help of 2 hired hands. He had inherited it from his father 5 years ago and had been building it up slowly but steadily. He was 26, had never been married, and loved the work despite its challenges. "It is not easy," he admitted one afternoon as they repaired a section of Tessa's fence together. "Cattle prices fluctuate, rustlers are always a concern, and the weather can make or break a season. But there is something satisfying about building something with your own hands, about working with the land rather than against it." Tessa understood completely. "That is how I feel about teaching. Or at least how I hope to feel. I start at the school next week and I confess I am nervous." "Why nervous? You are clearly intelligent and capable. People do not always see past my height. They make assumptions, have expectations." "I worry the parents will object to having such an unusual person teaching their children." Lucas set down his hammer and looked up at her with those steady, warm eyes. "Then they would be fools. Your height has nothing to do with your ability to teach. And anyone who cannot see that is not worth your concern. You make it sound simple. It is simple. It is people who complicate things." Tessa could not help but smile. "You are very kind, Lucas. I imagine many women in town have noticed." He looked away, back at the fence, and she thought she detected a slight color rising in his cheeks. "I do not pay much attention to what women in town notice or do not notice. I am too busy with the ranch." But there was something in the way he said it that made Tessa wonder. Had Lucas faced his own share of rejection? Was he, like her, someone who did not quite fit the expected mold? The day before school started, Tessa walked into town to see the schoolhouse and prepare her classroom. It was a simple building, one large room with rows of desks, a wood stove for heat, and a blackboard at the front. Someone had left a pile of books and slates for her use, and she spent the afternoon organizing materials and planning her first lessons. She was so absorbed in her work that she did not hear the door open behind her. It was only when a woman's voice said, "So you are the new teacher," that Tessa spun around, startled. 3 women stood in the doorway. They were dressed in the fashionable clothes of respectable town ladies, their hair perfectly arranged, their expressions ranging from curious to openly hostile. "I am Tessa Whitmore," she said, straightening to her full height. She saw their eyes widen, saw the way they exchanged glances. "We heard you were tall," one of them said, a blonde woman with a pinched face. "But this is quite excessive. Are you certain you are suited to teaching? The children might find you frightening." Tessa felt anger flare in her chest but kept her voice level. "I assure you I am well qualified. I have education and experience, and I care deeply about helping children learn. Nevertheless," the blonde woman continued, "we have concerns. I am Mrs. Patricia Hartwell and my husband is on the town council. This is Mrs. Alina Morrison and Mrs. Catherine Reid. We represent many of the families whose children will attend this school." "I see. And what are your concerns specifically?" Mrs. Hartwell sniffed. "Propriety, Miss Whitmore. A woman of your unusual stature might give the children strange ideas. And frankly, we worry about your ability to command respect. People in this town value normal, respectable behavior." The word normal stung more than Tessa wanted to admit. She had heard it weaponized against her countless times. "I intend to teach reading, writing, mathematics, and history. I fail to see how my height affects any of those subjects." "It is not just your height," Mrs. Morrison chimed in, a dark-haired woman with sharp features. "It is what your height represents. An aberration. We must think of the children's well-being." Tessa was forming a sharp response when a new voice cut through the tension. "Ladies, I am sure Miss Whitmore is more than capable of handling her classroom." All 4 women turned to see Lucas standing in the doorway. He removed his hat as he entered, nodding politely to the 3 town women. "Mr. Fletcher," Mrs. Hartwell said, her tone immediately softening. "What brings you to town?" "Supplies," he said simply. "And I wanted to check on Miss Whitmore, make sure she had everything she needed for tomorrow. She was a good friend to Miss Whitmore's aunt, and I consider it my duty to look after her niece." The way he said it left no room for argument. The 3 women exchanged glances again, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to challenge Lucas directly. "We were just expressing some concerns," Mrs. Reed said, speaking for the first time. She was older than the other 2, with gray streaking her brown hair. "I heard your concerns," Lucas said, his voice still polite but with an edge of steel underneath. "And I think they are unfounded. Miss Whitmore comes highly recommended, and this town is lucky to have her. I am sure the children will benefit greatly from her instruction." There was a long, uncomfortable silence. Finally, Mrs. Hartwell gathered her skirts. "Well, we shall see how things progress. Come along, ladies." The 3 women filed out, and Tessa heard their whispers starting before they even cleared the doorway. She sank into the chair behind the teacher's desk, suddenly exhausted. "You did not have to do that," she said quietly. Lucas came further into the room, looking around at the preparations she had made. "I know I did not have to, but I wanted to. Those women are the worst kind of gossips, and they make life difficult for anyone who does not fit their narrow view of how things should be." "Have they made life difficult for you?" he shrugged. "They have tried, but I have thick skin and land that makes me valuable enough that they cannot afford to alienate me completely. It is one of the few advantages of inheriting property." Tessa looked at him standing there in the afternoon light streaming through the schoolhouse windows, and she felt something shift in her chest. This man, who barely knew her, had stood up for her against the social powers of the town. More than that, he had done it without making a spectacle of her height, without treating her like a victim or a curiosity. "Why are you being so kind to me, Lucas?" He was quiet for a moment, turning his hat in his hands. Then he looked up at her with those steady brown eyes and said, "Because kindness is free and you deserve it. And because I like you, Tessa. I like the way you work hard and do not complain. I like the way you laugh at my bad jokes. I like the way you treat me like just a man, not someone you have to impress or perform for. Is that reason enough?" Tessa felt her breath catch. No man had ever spoken to her like this, with such simple honesty and warmth. "That is more than reason enough." He smiled then, a real smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Good. Now, do you need help carrying anything back to your house? I have my wagon in town. That would be wonderful." They loaded her few supplies into his wagon and rode back to her house as the sun began to set. Lucas did not seem to feel the need to fill the silence with chatter, and Tessa appreciated that. She watched the landscape roll by, the mountains darkening against the orange sky, and felt a sense of peace she had not experienced in years. When they reached her house, Lucas helped her unload and then lingered on the porch, clearly wanting to say something but hesitating. "What is it?" Tessa prompted gently. "I was wondering if you might like to come to dinner at my ranch this Sunday. Nothing fancy, just a meal. My cook makes a fine roast and it would be nice to have company." Tessa's heart began to race. Was this a romantic invitation, or simply neighborly kindness? She searched his face for clues but found only genuine hopefulness. "I would like that very much," she said. His smile was worth any uncertainty she felt. "Sunday then, around noon. I will be there." After he left, Tessa went inside and sat in her aunt's rocking chair, her mind spinning. She could not let herself hope too much. Lucas was kind, but that did not mean he saw her as anything more than a neighbor or friend. Yet the way he looked at her, the way he spoke to her, suggested something deeper. She would not let herself get carried away. Hope was a dangerous thing for a woman like her. The first day of school arrived with clear skies and warm temperatures. Tessa dressed carefully in her best dress, a simple blue cotton that she had sewn herself. She braided her long brown hair and pinned it up, then walked to the schoolhouse with her materials. Children began arriving with their parents shortly after 8 in the morning. Tessa stood on the schoolhouse steps and greeted each family, shaking hands and introducing herself. She watched the parents' faces as they saw her full height, saw the concern and sometimes outright disapproval. The children, however, seemed more curious than frightened. A little girl with red braids looked way up at Tessa and asked in a clear, innocent voice, "Are you a giant, miss?" "No, sweetheart, I am just a very tall woman. My name is Miss Whitmore and I am going to be your teacher." "Oh," the girl said, considering this. "That is all right then. I am Sally." "It is nice to meet you, Sally." By the time the school bell rang at 9, Tessa had 23 students ranging in age from 6 to 14. She called them to order and introduced herself properly, telling them a little about her background and her expectations for the classroom. The day went better than she had dared hope. The children were attentive and eager to learn. She taught reading to the younger ones while the older students worked on mathematics problems. At lunch, the children played outside while Tessa prepared the afternoon lessons. She was watching them through the window when she noticed a group of boys huddled together, occasionally glancing back at the schoolhouse and laughing. Her heart sank. She recognized this behavior. They were mocking her. Sure enough, when the afternoon session began, one of the older boys, a lanky 14-year-old named Thomas, raised his hand. "Yes, Thomas. Miss Whitmore, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "How come you are so tall? My pa says it is not natural for a woman to be that size." Several students giggled. Tessa felt the familiar heat of embarrassment but forced herself to remain calm. "People come in all different sizes, Thomas. Some are tall, some are short, some are in between. I happen to be very tall. It does not make me unnatural, just different." "And different is not the same as wrong. But don't it bother you?" Another boy piped up. Being so freakish, the word hit her like a slap, but Tessa kept her composure. "I am not freakish, James, and I will not tolerate unkind language in my classroom. We treat everyone with respect here, regardless of how they look or how tall they are. Is that understood?" The classroom fell silent. Some students looked ashamed, others defiant. Tessa knew this was a crucial moment. How she handled it would set the tone for the rest of the year. "Let me tell you something," she said, moving to sit on the edge of her desk so she was slightly less imposing. "Every person in this world is different in some way. Maybe you are tall or short. Maybe you have red hair or brown. Maybe you are good at mathematics but struggle with reading. Maybe you are shy or outgoing or somewhere in between. These differences are what make us interesting. They are what make us who we are. And the measure of a good person is not whether they fit some idea of what is normal, but whether they are kind, honest, and hardworking." She looked around the classroom, meeting each student's eyes. "I am tall. That is true, but I am also educated and I love teaching, and I am going to work very hard to help each of you learn and grow. If you can look past my height and give me a chance, I promise I will give you my very best. Can we agree to that?" There was a pause, and then Sally, the little red-headed girl from that morning, raised her hand. "Yes, Sally, I think you are nice, Miss Whitmore, and I do not care if you are tall." Several other students nodded in agreement. Even Thomas looked slightly ashamed of his earlier comment. "Thank you, Sally. Now, let us get back to our lessons." The rest of the day passed without incident, and when the children filed out at 3 in the afternoon, Tessa felt cautiously optimistic. It had not been perfect, but it had been a start. She was cleaning the blackboard when she heard someone enter the schoolhouse. She turned to find Lucas standing there, hat in hand. "How did it go?" he asked. Tessa smiled, surprised by how happy she was to see him. "It went well, all things considered. There were some difficult moments, but I think we will be all right." "I never doubted it. I just wanted to check on you, make sure those town gossips had not stirred up trouble." Some of the children repeated things they had heard from their parents, but children are more open-minded than adults. "They will come around." Lucas nodded, then seemed to remember something. "I also wanted to confirm Sunday dinner. You are still coming, right? I would not miss it." "Good." He put his hat back on and tipped it to her. "I will let you finish up here. See you Sunday, Tessa." After he left, Tessa found herself humming as she finished her tasks. Despite the challenges, despite the whispers and stares, she felt more hopeful than she had in years. She had a home, a job, and maybe, just maybe, she was beginning to make a friend who could become something more. The days between that first school day and Sunday dinner seemed to crawl by. Tessa kept busy with teaching and tending her garden, but her mind kept wandering to Lucas and what the dinner might mean. She told herself not to read too much into it, that he was just being neighborly, but her heart refused to listen to reason. Sunday morning, she woke early and spent extra time on her appearance. She chose her best dress, a dark green cotton with delicate buttons that she had splurged on back in Philadelphia. She let her hair down in soft waves rather than pinning it up, and she even pinched her cheeks for color. The walk to Lucas's ranch took her across open prairie dotted with wildflowers. It was a beautiful late September day, warm but with a hint of the cooler weather to come. She could see cattle grazing in the distance and a cluster of buildings that must be the ranch headquarters. As she approached, Lucas emerged from the main house, a two-story structure that was larger and more substantial than her own small home. He had cleaned up as well, wearing a fresh shirt and pants, his hair combed back, his face clean-shaven. "Tessa," he said, walking out to meet her. "Right on time. Welcome to Fletcher Ranch." He gave her a tour of the property, showing her the barn where he kept his horses, the bunkhouse where his hired hands lived, and the various outbuildings necessary for running a ranch. He introduced her to his two employees, grizzled men named Joe and Hank, who tipped their hats respectfully and did not comment on her height. "They are good men," Lucas said as they walked back toward the house. "Loyal and hardworking. I could not manage this place without them." Inside, the house was comfortable and well kept, though it clearly lacked a woman's touch. The furniture was practical rather than decorative, and the walls were bare except for a few photographs. Lucas led her to the dining room where a middle-aged Mexican woman was setting out platters of food. "Tessa, this is Carmela. She cooks for me and keeps the house from falling into complete chaos. Carmela, this is Miss Whitmore, my neighbor." Carmela looked up at Tessa and her face broke into a warm smile. "Welcome, welcome, please sit. I have made plenty of food." The meal was indeed generous. Roast beef, potatoes, vegetables, fresh bread, and a berry pie for dessert. As they ate, Lucas and Tessa talked easily about everything and nothing. He asked about her week at school, and she told him about her students and the progress they were making. He told her about a difficult cow that had given birth to twins, a rare occurrence that required extra care. "You really love this work," Tessa observed. "I do. It is hard, sometimes frustrating, but it is mine. I am building something here, creating something that will last. That matters to me." "I understand that. Teaching feels the same way. You are shaping young minds, giving them tools they will use for the rest of their lives." "Exactly." Lucas leaned back in his chair, studying her. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Why did you come west?" "I mean, obviously you inherited your aunt's property, but you could have sold it. You could have stayed in Pennsylvania. What made you decide to come here? Tessa considered the question carefully. Honestly, I wanted a fresh start. Back east, I was always the tall woman, the spinster, the one people pitied or mocked. I thought maybe out here, on the frontier where things are less settled, I might have a chance to be seen as just Tessa, not as a curiosity or a problem. And has it worked? Do you feel like you are getting that fresh start? I do not know yet. The stares and whispers are still there. But there are moments like teaching my students or working in my garden or having dinner with you where I feel like maybe I can build a real life here. Lucas reached across the table and took her hand. The gesture was so unexpected that Tessa almost pulled away, but his grip was warm and steady. You can build a real life here, Tessa. I believe that. And for what it is worth, when I look at you, I do not see a curiosity or a problem. I see a beautiful, intelligent, capable woman who happens to be tall. Tessa felt tears prick her eyes. You really mean that? I really do. In fact, I need to be honest with you about something. I did not invite you here just to be neighborly. I invited you because I am attracted to you. Because I think about you all the time. Because when I look up at you, I do not feel diminished. I feel lucky that you are looking back at me. The words hung in the air between them, charged with possibility. Tessa's heart was racing so fast she thought it might burst from her chest. Lucas, I need you to understand something. My height has made me invisible to men my entire life. I have never been courted, never been kissed, never even been seen as a potential romantic partner. If you are doing this out of pity or because you feel sorry for me, please tell me now before I let myself hope. He stood up and came around the table, and before she could react, he cupped her face in his hands and tilted her head down toward his. This is not pity, he said softly. Then he kissed her. It was gentle and sweet, and everything Tessa had dreamed a first kiss should be. When they parted, she was breathless. I have wanted to do that since the day I met you, Lucas said. I have wanted you to do that since the day you met me, Tessa admitted. He laughed, a joyful sound that made her heart soar. Then we have been wasting time being proper and careful. Maybe a little bit of proper and careful is not a bad thing. Maybe not. But now that I have told you how I feel, I am not going to waste any more time. Tessa Whitmore, I would like to court you properly. I would like to take you to church socials and town dances and anywhere else you want to go. I would like to spend my evenings sitting on your porch and my Sundays having dinner with you. And eventually, if you will have me, I would like to marry you and spend the rest of my life looking up at the woman I love. Tessa could not stop the tears that spilled down her cheeks. Yes, she whispered. Yes to all of it. They spent the rest of the afternoon on his porch, sitting close together on a bench swing, talking about their hopes and dreams and everything they wanted from life. When the sun began to set, and it was time for Tessa to go home, Lucas insisted on walking her back. They held hands as they crossed the prairie, and Tessa felt like she was floating. For the first time in her life, she was being courted by a good man who saw her as she truly was. As they reached her porch, Lucas pulled her close and kissed her again, longer and deeper this time. When they finally parted, he rested his forehead against hers and sighed contentedly. I will see you tomorrow, he promised. I will be here. She watched him walk back toward his ranch, and then she went inside and spun around her little house, laughing with pure joy. The tall woman who had been mocked and pitied her entire life was falling in love, and it was more wonderful than she ever could have imagined. The next few weeks passed in a blur of happiness. Lucas kept his word, courting Tessa properly despite the raised eyebrows and whispered comments from the town gossips. He picked her up for church on Sundays, sitting beside her in the pew and ignoring the stares. He took her to the town's social dance, where they waltzed together despite the fact that she had to lead because of her height advantage. "I do not mind," Lucas said as they moved across the floor. "I like that you are tall enough that I can rest my head against your shoulder." "People are staring," Tessa said, though she was smiling. "Let them stare. They are just jealous because they do not have what we have." The children at school noticed the change in their teacher. Tessa was happier, more relaxed, and it showed in her teaching. She became more creative with her lessons, more patient with struggling students, more quick to laugh at their jokes. Sally, the little red-headed girl, said one day, "Miss Whitmore, you seem different, you smile more." "Do I? Well, I suppose I have reason to smile. I am very happy here in La Junta." "Is it because of Mr. Fletcher?" asked another girl with a knowing look far beyond her years. "My mamma says you are courting him." Tessa felt her cheeks heat, but decided honesty was the best policy. "Yes, Mr. Fletcher and I are courting, and yes, that is part of why I am so happy." "Are you going to get married?" Sally asked with wide eyes. "Maybe someday. But that is for the future. Right now, let us focus on your spelling words." The children giggled but returned to their work. Tessa knew the whole town was talking about her relationship with Lucas, but for once the gossip did not bother her as much. Let them talk. She was happy, truly happy for the first time in her life. Not everyone was pleased, though. Mrs. Hartwell and her circle of friends made their disapproval known at every opportunity. They whispered behind their fans at church. They made pointed comments about propriety and the natural order of things. They suggested that Lucas was making a mistake, that he was settling for less than he deserved. One afternoon in late October, Mrs. Hartwell cornered Tessa outside the general store. "Miss Whitmore, I feel it is my duty to speak plainly with you." Tessa straightened to her full height, which had the unintended effect of making Mrs. Hartwell take a step back. "Please do, Mrs. Hartwell. This courtship with Mr. Fletcher is unseemly. You are a schoolteacher, a position that requires propriety and good judgment. Parading around town with a man who is shorter than you sends the wrong message to our children." Tessa felt anger flare hot in her chest. "Mr. Fletcher and I are not parading anywhere. We are conducting ourselves with perfect propriety, and my height relative to his has no bearing on the quality of our relationship or my ability to teach. Nevertheless, people are talking. Some parents are concerned about your influence on their children." "Concerned about what exactly?" "That I might teach them that love and respect matter more than arbitrary physical characteristics. That seems like a valuable lesson to me." Mrs. Hartwell's face pinched with displeasure. "You are being deliberately obtuse. A woman of your unusual stature should be grateful for any attention, not flaunting herself around town with a respectable rancher. People are wondering what hold you have over him, what unnatural influence you might be exerting." The accusation was so absurd that Tessa almost laughed. Almost. But underneath the absurdity was real malice, real cruelty designed to wound. "I have no hold over Lucas except that which comes from mutual affection and respect," Tessa said coldly. "And if you or anyone else has concerns about my teaching, please feel free to raise them with the school board. Now, if you will excuse me, I have errands to complete." She brushed past Mrs. Hartwell and entered the store, her hands shaking with suppressed anger. The storekeeper, a kind man named Mr. Patterson, gave her a sympathetic look. "Don't let them get to you, Miss Whitmore," he said quietly as he gathered her supplies. "There will always be people who cannot stand to see others happy, especially if that happiness does not fit their narrow view of how the world should work." "Thank you, Mr. Patterson. That is kind of you to say. It is just the truth. For what it is worth, my daughter is in your class and she loves you, says you are the best teacher she has ever had. That is what matters, not the opinions of bitter old gossips." Tessa felt tears prick her eyes at this unexpected kindness. Thank you. That means more than you know. That evening, she told Lucas about the encounter. They were sitting on her porch, watching the sun set over the mountains, and his arm was around her shoulders. "I am sorry you had to deal with that," he said, his voice tight with anger. "Mrs. Hartwell is a miserable woman who tries to make everyone else miserable too. I know. But she is also influential. What if she convinces the school board that I am not fit to teach? What if her campaign against us costs me my position?" Lucas turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Then we will deal with it. But I am not going to let fear of what might happen keep me from being with you. I love you, Tessa. I have loved you almost from the moment I met you, and I do not care what Mrs. Hartwell or anyone else thinks about it." Tessa's breath caught. It was the first time he had said those words out loud. "You love me. I love you. Is that so hard to believe?" "A little bit, yes. I am not used to being loved." He pulled her close, and she rested her head on top of his, their height difference meaning that this position was natural and comfortable for both of them. "Then get used to it," he murmured, "because I plan on loving you for the rest of my life." "I love you too," Tessa whispered. "So much it frightens me sometimes." Love is frightening. It makes us vulnerable, but it is also the most wonderful thing in the world. They sat together as the stars came out, and Tessa felt a deep sense of peace settle over her. Whatever challenges they faced, they would face them together. The school board meeting happened 2 weeks later. Mrs. Hartwell had indeed lodged a formal complaint about Tessa's teaching, claiming that her unseemly courtship and unnatural appearance were having a detrimental effect on the children. The board had called a special meeting to discuss the matter, and Tessa was required to attend. She dressed carefully that evening, choosing a sober dark dress and pinning her hair up in a severe style. She wanted to look professional and serious, to show that she took her position seriously. Lucas insisted on accompanying her, and they walked to the town hall together. Inside, the board members sat at a long table. 5 men, including Mr. Thompson, the lawyer, and Mrs. Hartwell's husband, a portly man with a permanent scowl. "Miss Whitmore," Mr. Thompson began. "Thank you for coming. We have received some concerns about your performance as a teacher, and we wanted to give you a chance to address them." "I am happy to address any concerns," Tessa said, keeping her voice steady. Mr. Hartwell shuffled some papers. "Mrs. Hartwell has submitted a list of complaints. She claims that your unusual height and your courtship with Mr. Fletcher are creating a distraction in the classroom and setting a poor example for the children. With respect, Mr. Hartwell, I fail to see how my height or my personal life affect my teaching abilities. Some parents feel that you are encouraging their children to accept abnormality as normal," another board member said. "If by abnormality you mean treating all people with dignity and respect regardless of their physical appearance, then yes, I suppose I am guilty of that." Mr. Thompson hid a smile behind his hand. "Miss Whitmore, can you tell us about your teaching? How are the students performing?" Tessa seized on this opportunity. "The students are performing very well. In the 2 months since I started, I have seen significant improvement in reading comprehension among the younger students. The older students are progressing well in mathematics and history. Attendance has been consistent, and the children seem engaged and eager to learn." "But what about discipline?" Mr. Hartwell pressed. "Can you maintain control of your classroom given your unusual situation? My height has never been an impediment to classroom management. In fact, the children respond well to firm but fair discipline. I have had very few behavioral issues." Lucas, who had been standing quietly at the back of the room, stepped forward. "If I may speak," the board members looked at each other, then Mr. Thompson nodded. "Go ahead, Mr. Fletcher." I want to say that Miss Whitmore is one of the most capable, intelligent, and dedicated people I have ever met. The fact that she is tall is irrelevant to her abilities as a teacher. And as for our courtship, we are conducting ourselves with complete propriety. The only people who seem to have a problem with it are those who cannot accept that people come in different sizes, and that love does not have to fit some predetermined mold. That is easy for you to say, Mr. Hartwell said dismissively. You are not responsible for the moral education of our children. Actually, we all are, Lucas replied. And I would say that Miss Whitmore is teaching them a valuable lesson about looking past superficial differences to see a person's true character. That seems like an important part of moral education to me. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat. Are there any parents here who wish to speak for or against Miss Whitmore? Tessa had not realized that parents had been invited, but now she saw several familiar faces in the rows of chairs. To her surprise and gratitude, Mr. Patterson, the storekeeper, stood up. My daughter Emma is in Miss Whitmore's class, he said, and she has never been more excited about learning. Miss Whitmore has patience and creativity, and she genuinely cares about the children. That is what matters, not how tall she is or who she is courting. Another parent stood, a farmer named Mr. Jenkins. My boys have had 3 different teachers in the past 4 years. None of them stuck around long. Miss Whitmore is the first one who seems committed to staying and making a real difference. I would hate to lose her over something as foolish as her height. A few other parents spoke in support, and Tessa felt tears threatening. She had not realized she had earned this much goodwill from the community. Finally, Mr. Thompson called the room to order. Thank you, everyone. The board will deliberate and make a decision. Miss Whitmore, you are excused. Tessa and Lucas left the town hall and walked slowly back toward her house. The night was cool, autumn settling into the mountains, and Tessa wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders. What do you think they will decide? She asked. I think Mr. Thompson and at least 2 others will support you. Hartwell is against you, but he is just 1 vote. I believe you will keep your position. I hope you are right. They reached her porch and Lucas pulled her into his arms. Whatever they decide, we will face it together. If they remove you from your teaching position because of small-minded prejudice, we will find another way. You could teach privately, or we could start our own school, or we could do something else entirely. The point is, we will figure it out together. When did you become so wise? Tessa asked with a small smile. I have always been wise. You are just now noticing. She laughed despite her anxiety, and he kissed her until she forgot about the school board and Mrs. Hartwell, and everything except the feeling of being loved and cherished. The board's decision came 3 days later. Mr. Thompson delivered the news himself, riding out to Tessa's house just as she was returning from school. Miss Whitmore, he said, dismounting from his horse, I wanted to tell you personally. The board voted to retain you as the schoolteacher. The vote was 4-1, with only Mr. Hartwell dissenting. Tessa felt a wave of relief so strong it nearly knocked her over. Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Thank you so much. No thanks necessary. You are an excellent teacher and the board recognizes that. However, I must warn you that Mrs. Hartwell is not happy with this decision. She may continue to cause trouble. I can handle Mrs. Hartwell. I believe you can. One more thing, Miss Whitmore. Off the record, as someone who has practiced law in frontier towns for 20 years, I want you to know that your courage in living your life authentically, in refusing to hide or diminish yourself, is inspiring. This is a hard place for anyone who does not fit the mold, and you are showing people that it is possible to be different and still be successful and happy. Tessa was deeply moved. That means a great deal coming from you, Mr. Thompson. After he left, Tessa ran across the prairie to Lucas's ranch, not caring how undignified she looked. She found him in the barn and she threw herself into his arms, laughing and crying at the same time. I get to keep my position. The board voted in my favor. Lucas spun her around and then he kissed her thoroughly, not caring that his hired hands were probably watching from the bunkhouse. I never doubted it for a second, he said when they finally came up for air. Liar. You were just as worried as I was. Maybe a little bit, but only a little bit. That night, they celebrated with dinner at her house. Tessa cooked her best meal and Lucas brought wine from his cellar. They toasted to her victory and to their future together. I have been thinking, Lucas said as they cleared the dishes. I know we have only been courting for a couple of months, but I am not a man who likes to waste time. I know what I want, Tessa, and what I want is you. Will you marry me? Tessa's hands stilled in the dishwater. She turned to look at him, and she saw nothing but love and sincerity in his eyes. Yes, she said without hesitation. Yes, I will marry you. He pulled a simple gold band from his pocket, a ring that had belonged to his mother. It fit her finger perfectly, and Tessa stared at it through tears of joy. I want to marry you as soon as possible, Lucas said. I do not want to wait. I have already waited my whole life to find you. Then let us not wait. Let us marry as soon as we can arrange it. They decided on a wedding in early November, just before the weather turned too cold. They would marry in the small church in town, and Lucas would move into Tessa's house since it was closer to the school. Eventually, they would build a bigger house on his ranch property, but for now, her little home would be their home. The news of their engagement spread through La Junta like wildfire. Most people were genuinely happy for them, but Mrs. Hartwell and her circle made their displeasure known at every opportunity. They predicted disaster, claiming that such an unnatural union could never last, that Lucas would regret his decision. Tessa tried to ignore the gossip, focusing instead on wedding preparations and her teaching. But 2 weeks before the wedding, something happened that tested her resolve. She was walking home from school one afternoon when she heard voices from an alley between two buildings. She recognized Mrs. Hartwell's sharp tone and paused, not wanting to confront the woman but unable to avoid overhearing. I am telling you, Lucas Fletcher will regret this marriage within a year. That freakish woman will make his life miserable. She probably tricked him somehow, made him feel sorry for her. But they seem genuinely happy, another voice said doubtfully. Happiness fades. And when it does, he will be stuck with a wife who towers over him, who makes him look ridiculous. People are already laughing at him behind his back. Tessa felt sick to her stomach. Were people really laughing at Lucas? Was she making his life harder by accepting his proposal? She walked home in a daze, and when Lucas arrived that evening for dinner, she was sitting on the porch steps, her face troubled. What is wrong? He asked immediately, sitting beside her. She told him what she had overheard, and she watched his expression darken with anger. That woman is poison, he said flatly. And everything she said is a lie. No one is laughing at me, and even if they were, I would not care. Tessa, please tell me you are not having second thoughts because of Patricia Hartwell's venom. I am not having second thoughts about loving you, Tessa said carefully. But I am having doubts about whether it is fair to you to marry me. Your life would be easier if you chose someone more conventional, someone who fit in better. Lucas took her hands in his grip firm and reassuring. My life would not be easier. It would be emptier and sadder and completely lacking in joy. You are not a burden, Tessa. You are a gift. And if you think I am going to let the opinions of small-minded people come between us, you do not know me very well. But what if she is right? What if people do laugh at you? Then I will laugh right back at them for being too foolish to see what I see. A beautiful, brilliant woman who makes me happier than I ever thought possible. Tessa, look at me. She raised her eyes to his. "I am going to say this once, and I need you to really hear it. I am proud to be with you. Proud to walk beside you even though you are taller. Proud to introduce you as my future wife. Proud to spend my life looking up at you, because when I look up at you, I see everything good in the world. Do you understand?" Tessa felt tears spill down her cheeks. "I understand. Good. Now, are we getting married in 2 weeks or not?" "We are definitely getting married in 2 weeks." He kissed her then, and Tessa felt all her doubts melt away. Mrs. Hartwell could say whatever she wanted. Nothing was going to keep Tessa from marrying the man she loved. The wedding day arrived cold and bright, with a dusting of snow on the mountains. Tessa wore a dress she had sewn herself, cream-colored silk that she had splurged on from the general store. She wore her hair down in soft curls, with a simple wreath of autumn flowers crowning her head. She had no family to give her away, so Mr. Thompson offered to walk her down the aisle. "It would be an honor," he said, and Tessa accepted gratefully. The church was packed, with nearly the entire town in attendance. Some came out of genuine happiness for the couple, others out of curiosity. Mrs. Hartwell sat in the front row with her husband, her face pinched with disapproval, but Tessa barely noticed any of them. All she could see was Lucas standing at the altar, looking handsome in his Sunday best, his face shining with love and joy as he watched her approach. When she reached his side, he took her hands and looked up at her with such open adoration that several women in the congregation sighed audibly. The minister, an older man named Reverend Barnes, smiled at them both. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." The ceremony was simple and traditional. They exchanged vows, promising to love and honor each other for the rest of their lives. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Lucas pulled Tessa down and kissed her deeply, not caring who was watching. The reception was held in the church hall, with food donated by various townspeople. There was music and dancing, and Tessa found herself swept up in the celebration. Lucas refused to leave her side, his hand always at her waist or holding hers. When they danced, he looked up at her and said, "You are perfect for my heart, Tessa Fletcher. Exactly perfect. And you are perfect for mine. Even Mrs. Hartwell could not ruin this day." She left the reception early, but Tessa barely noticed. She was too busy dancing with her husband, surrounded by friends and well-wishers, feeling happier than she ever had in her entire life. That night, in the privacy of their little house, Lucas and Tessa consummated their marriage. He was gentle and loving, making her feel cherished in a way she had never experienced before. Afterward, they lay tangled together in bed, her head on his chest, his arms around her. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too." And tomorrow, and the next day, and every day after that for the rest of our lives. The first year of their marriage was not without challenges. There were still those in town who disapproved of their union, who made snide comments or treated Tessa coldly. But for every person who disapproved, there seemed to be two more who supported them. The children at school adored their tall teacher and were fascinated that she was married to the nice rancher who sometimes came to visit. Lucas and Tessa fell into a comfortable routine. She taught during the day while he worked his ranch. In the evenings, they would have dinner together and talk about their days. On weekends, they worked on improving their property, planning for the bigger house they would eventually build. In the spring, Tessa discovered she was pregnant. She was terrified at first, worried about whether she could be a good mother, but Lucas was overjoyed. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, his hand on her still flat stomach. "A baby, Tessa. I know. Are you sure you are ready for this?" "I have been ready since the day I met you." The pregnancy was difficult. Tessa's height made everything more complicated, and she had to stop teaching in her 6th month when it became too physically demanding. She worried about the school, about her students, but the board hired a temporary teacher and assured her that her position would be waiting when she was ready to return. In November, exactly 1 year after their wedding, Tessa went into labor. It was long and difficult, and there were moments when Lucas feared he might lose her. But in the early hours of the morning, their son was born, a healthy baby boy with a powerful set of lungs. "What should we name him?" Tessa asked, exhausted but radiant as she held their son. "I was thinking about my father's name, William, but we can call him Will. Will Fletcher, I like that. Hello, little Will. Welcome to the world." Lucas held his son for the first time, and Tessa saw tears streaming down his face. "He is perfect. You are both perfect." Motherhood transformed Tessa in ways she never expected. She loved her son with a fierce, protective love that sometimes frightened her in its intensity. Lucas was a devoted father, helping with the baby despite the demands of the ranch. They were exhausted and overwhelmed, but they were also happier than ever. When Will was 6 months old, Tessa returned to teaching part-time. Carmela, Lucas's housekeeper, had agreed to watch the baby during school hours, and the arrangement worked well. Tessa found that she had not lost her touch with the children, and they were excited to have their beloved teacher back. The years passed in a blur of happiness and hard work. Will grew into a sturdy, curious toddler, then a bright young boy. When he was 3, Tessa discovered she was pregnant again. This time, she carried twins, a boy they named James and a girl they named Rose. Their little house became too small for their growing family, so Lucas finally built the larger home he had been planning on his ranch property. It was a beautiful 2-story house with plenty of room for children to run and play. Tessa continued teaching, though she reduced her hours to part-time. Lucas's ranch prospered, and they became one of the more successful families in La Junta. Mrs. Hartwell eventually moved away when her husband's business failed, and Tessa felt relief at no longer having to deal with her constant disapproval. Most of the other townspeople had long since accepted the Fletcher family, and Tessa found that she was no longer the subject of gossip or mockery. She was just Tessa Fletcher, the tall schoolteacher with the nice family. One evening when Tessa was 35 and Lucas was 37, they sat on the porch of their ranch house watching their children play in the yard. Will was now 12, tall like his mother and showing signs that he would likely surpass even her height. James and Rose were 9, twins who looked nothing alike but were inseparable. "You ever think about that first day we met?" Lucas asked, his arm around Tessa's shoulders. "Of course I do. You changed my entire life that day. You changed mine too. I was so lonely before you came, Tessa. I did not even realize how lonely until I met you and suddenly felt whole." "People used to mock me for being too tall," Tessa said softly. "They said no man would ever want me. But you looked up at me and said I was perfect for your heart. You are perfect for my heart. You always have been, and you always will be." They kissed as the sun set over the mountains, and Tessa felt a deep sense of gratitude for the life they had built together. She had come to La Junta expecting nothing more than a place to hide from the world's cruelty. Instead, she had found love, family, and a community that eventually accepted her for who she was. The children grew, and new challenges came. Will inherited his mother's height and his father's work ethic, eventually taking over much of the ranch operations. James decided to become a teacher like his mother, studying at a college in Denver before returning to La Junta to teach at the same school where Tessa had spent so many years. Rose married a young doctor who moved to town, and they gave Lucas and Tessa their first grandchildren. As the years passed, and Tessa and Lucas grew older together, They never lost the love and respect that had brought them together. They held hands during church services, still drew stares occasionally when they walked through town, but they no longer cared what anyone thought. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Lucas organized a party at their ranch. Their children and grandchildren came, along with friends from town and neighboring ranches. It was a joyful celebration of a marriage that had defied expectations and proved that love could overcome any obstacle. That night, after everyone had gone home and they were alone in their bedroom, Lucas looked up at his wife and said the same words he had said so many times over the past 3 decades. "You are perfect for my heart, Tessa Fletcher. And you are perfect for mine, Lucas Fletcher." They had started as 2 lonely people in a frontier town, both searching for acceptance and belonging. They had found it in each other, building a life together that was richer and more beautiful than either of them could have imagined. Tessa had been mocked for her height, told she was too tall, too different, too much. But Lucas had looked up at her and seen not a problem to be solved but a woman to be loved. As they drifted off to sleep in each other's arms, surrounded by the evidence of their decades together, family photos on the walls and grandchildren's drawings on the dresser, Tessa reflected on how wrong those early critics had been. Her height had not been a curse or an obstacle. It had been part of who she was, and Lucas had loved every inch of her. Several more years passed, and Tessa and Lucas grew into their 70s. Their children were established adults with families of their own. The ranch prospered under Will's management, and James had become the principal of the Junta school. Rose's medical practice with her husband had expanded, serving communities throughout the region. Tessa had long since retired from teaching, but her influence lived on in the hundreds of students she had taught over the decades. Many of them came to visit, bringing their own children and grandchildren to meet the tall teacher who had shown them that being different was not something to be ashamed of. Lucas still worked the ranch as much as his aging body would allow, though he had handed over most of the daily operations to Will. He and Tessa spent their days enjoying the quiet pleasures of a life well lived, tending their garden, reading together on the porch, visiting with family and friends. One spring morning, Tessa woke to find Lucas watching her with the same loving expression he had worn when they were newlyweds. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, stretching in the early morning light. "I am thinking about how lucky I am. 50 years married to the love of my life, and I still get to wake up next to you every morning. 50 years. Can you believe it? Sometimes, no. It feels like just yesterday that you stepped off that stagecoach so tall and proud, trying not to let anyone see how much their stares hurt you. I was terrified that day, but then I met you and everything changed." Lucas reached over and took her hand, his fingers finding hers with the ease of decades of practice. "You know what I remember most clearly? The moment I realized I was in love with you. It was about a week after we met. You were working in your garden and I came by to check on the chickens. You stood up when you saw me, brushed the dirt off your hands and smiled. And I thought, that is the woman I am going to marry. That is the woman I want to spend my life with. You never told me that before. I am telling you now. I knew from almost the very beginning that you were special, that what we had was something rare and precious, and I have never regretted a single day of our life together." Tessa felt tears prick her eyes. After 50 years, he could still make her cry with his words. "I have never regretted it either. You saved me, Lucas. You saved me from a life of loneliness and despair. You showed me that I could be loved exactly as I am. You saved yourself, Tessa. You had the courage to come west, to start over, to keep going even when people were cruel. I just had the good sense to recognize what an amazing woman you are." They lay together in comfortable silence, watching the sun rise through their bedroom window. It was moments like these that Tessa treasured most. The quiet intimacy of a long marriage, the deep comfort of being known completely by another person. Their 50th anniversary celebration was even larger than their 30th. Their children organized a party at the ranch that drew people from all over the county. Former students came, some now with grandchildren of their own. Neighboring ranchers came. Even the current mayor of La Junta, who had been one of Tessa's students decades ago, attended and gave a speech about the positive impact the Fletchers had had on the community. Tessa and Lucas Fletcher represent the best of what this town can be, the mayor said to the assembled crowd. They showed us that love transcends superficial differences, that courage means living authentically even when others disapprove, and that a life built on mutual respect and devotion is the richest life of all. La Junta is better because they chose to make it their home. Tessa held Lucas's hand throughout the speeches and celebrations, overwhelmed by the outpouring of love and respect. The tall woman who had once been mocked and pitied was now honored and celebrated. It was a fitting testament to how far she had come, and how much the world around her had grown as well. As the party wound down and their last guests departed, Tessa and Lucas sat on their porch watching the stars come out over the mountains. Their children had insisted on cleaning up, shooing them away to rest. 50 years, Tessa said wonderingly. Half a century together. Best 50 years of my life, Lucas replied. Well, technically 51 if you count the year we courted before we got married. Always so precise. Someone has to be, with you being all romantic and poetic. She laughed and leaned her head against his. Even now, after all these years, their height difference remained the same. She was still tall, he was still shorter. But it had never mattered, not to them and eventually not to most people who knew them. You think we were lucky? Tessa asked. Or was it more than luck? Lucas considered this. I think we were lucky to find each other, but what we built together, that was not luck, that was choice. Every day we chose each other. We chose love over fear, acceptance over judgment, partnership over pride. That is not luck, that is work and commitment and devotion. When did you get so wise? I have always been wise. You keep forgetting that. It was an echo of a conversation they had had decades ago, and it made Tessa smile. Some things never changed, and she was grateful for it. They sat together until the night grew cool and they went inside to their warm house, to the bed they had shared for 50 years, to the life they had built with their own hands and hearts. Several more peaceful years passed. Tessa and Lucas grew older, their bodies slowing down but their love remaining as strong as ever. They watched their grandchildren grow up and start families of their own, making them great-grandparents. The ranch continued to thrive under Will's management, and the family remained close, gathering often for meals and celebrations. Then, one winter morning when Tessa was 79 and Lucas was 81, she woke to find him struggling to breathe. She called for help immediately, and their children rushed him to the hospital in town. The doctor, who happened to be their grandson-in-law, explained that Lucas's heart was failing. There was nothing they could do except make him comfortable. Tessa sat by his bedside, holding his hand, refusing to leave. Their children and grandchildren came to say goodbye, but Lucas seemed to be waiting for something. Finally, late in the evening, he asked everyone else to leave so he could be alone with Tessa. I am sorry, he whispered, his voice weak. I promised you forever, and I am breaking that promise. You are not breaking anything, Tessa said, tears streaming down her face. You gave me everything, Lucas. You gave me love and family and a life beyond my wildest dreams. You have nothing to apologize for. I am going to miss you so much. The thought of being apart from you, even for a moment, breaks my heart. Then do not think about it. Think about all the wonderful years we had together. Think about our children and grandchildren and all the love we created." Lucas managed a weak smile. 54 years of marriage, not bad for the short cowboy and the tall schoolteacher. Not bad at all. "Tessa, I need you to promise me something, anything. Promise me you will keep living, really living, not just existing but finding joy. You have so much life left to live and I want you to embrace it. I promise. But Lucas, you have to know that my heart is always going to be yours. Even after you are gone, I will still be yours. And I will still be yours. Death cannot change that." They talked through the night, reminiscing about their life together, laughing through tears at favorite memories. As dawn began to break, Lucas's breathing became more labored. Tessa climbed into the hospital bed beside him, holding him close despite the awkwardness of fitting two people into the narrow space. "I love you," she whispered. "I have loved you from the moment you looked up at me and told me I was perfect for your heart." "You are perfect for my heart," he murmured. "Now and always." Those were his last words. He died peacefully in Tessa's arms as the sun rose over the Colorado mountains, the same mountains they had watched together for more than half a century. The grief was overwhelming. Tessa felt like part of her soul had been ripped away, leaving a wound that would never fully heal. But she kept her promise to Lucas. She kept living. She moved back to the smaller house where they had first lived as newlyweds, the house that held so many happy memories. Her children worried about her living alone, but Tessa insisted. She needed the space to grieve, to remember, to slowly piece herself back together. She threw herself into community work, volunteering at the school and the library. She spent time with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, sharing stories about Lucas and making sure his legacy lived on. She tended her garden, finding peace in the rhythm of the seasons. And slowly, gradually, the sharp edges of her grief softened into something more bearable. She would never stop missing Lucas, never stop wishing he was beside her. But she learned to carry her loss while still finding moments of joy and beauty in the world around her. 5 years after Lucas died, Tessa was sitting on her porch when a young woman approached. She was unusually tall, probably 6 feet, and she carried herself with the defensive posture Tessa remembered from her own youth. "Are you Mrs. Fletcher?" the young woman asked. "I am. Can I help you? My name is Sarah Martin. I just moved to La Junta, and everyone keeps telling me I should talk to you. They say you understand what it is like to be different." Tessa studied the young woman and saw her younger self reflected back at her. The uncertainty, the pain of being mocked and excluded, the desperate hope that maybe here, in this new place, things could be different. "Sit down, Sarah. Let me tell you a story about a tall woman who came to this town a very long time ago, certain that she would never find acceptance or love. And let me tell you about the cowboy who looked up at her and said she was perfect for his heart." Sarah sat, and Tessa began to talk. She told her story, leaving nothing out. The mockery, the loneliness, the moment she met Lucas and everything changed. She talked about building a life together, about facing prejudice and overcoming it, about raising a family and growing old with the man she loved. "The world is full of people who will tell you that you are too much or not enough," Tessa said. "That you are too tall, too short, too different, too strange. But the truth is that you are exactly who you are supposed to be. And somewhere out there, there is someone who will look at you and see perfection. Not in spite of your height, but as part of the whole package of who you are." "Did you really find that?" Sarah asked. "Or are you just trying to make me feel better?" Tessa reached over and took the young woman's hand. "I really found it. I had 54 years of the most beautiful marriage you can imagine. And it started because a man named Lucas Fletcher had the courage to look past society's expectations and see me for who I truly was. She continued sharing her story and offering advice as the afternoon wore on. When Sarah finally left, she looked lighter, more hopeful than when she had arrived. Tessa watched her walk away and felt Lucas's presence beside her, as real as if he were actually there. "I kept my promise," she whispered to the empty air. "I am still living." Tessa lived to be 91 years old, remaining active and engaged with her community until the very end. She never remarried, never even considered it. Lucas had been the love of her life, and one great love was enough for any lifetime. When she finally passed away peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, her last coherent words were about Lucas. "I am coming, my love. I hope you have been waiting for me." They buried her next to Lucas in the cemetery overlooking La Junta, under the shadow of the mountains they had both loved. Her gravestone bore a simple inscription: Tessa Whitmore Fletcher, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, and teacher. She taught us that love sees with the heart, not the eyes. The town of La Junta mourned her passing, recognizing that they had lost someone truly special. Her funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives she had touched over the decades. Former students, their children and grandchildren, neighbors, friends, and community members, who remembered the tall schoolteacher who had shown them that being different was not something to fear. In the years that followed, Tessa and Lucas's story became part of the town's folklore. Parents told their children about the tall woman and the cowboy who loved her. Teachers used their example when discussing acceptance and courage. Young people who felt different or excluded took comfort in knowing that their town had once been home to two people who had faced similar struggles and triumphed. The house where Tessa and Lucas had first lived was eventually turned into a small museum, preserving their story for future generations. School groups visited to learn about the challenges of being different in a conformist society, and about how love could overcome any obstacle. But beyond the legend and the lessons, the true legacy of Tessa and Lucas Fletcher lived on in their descendants. Their children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and great-great-grandchildren carried forward the values they had embodied: courage, kindness, acceptance, and the understanding that love is not bound by superficial expectations. The tall woman who had been mocked for her unusual height had found a cowboy who looked up at her and saw perfection. Together, they had built a life of love, family, and community that rippled outward through time, touching countless lives and making the world a little bit kinder, a little bit more accepting, and a little bit more willing to see past surface differences to the human heart beneath. And in the end, that was the greatest legacy anyone could leave behind. Not wealth or fame or status, but the simple truth that love, in all its forms and despite all obstacles, is always worth fighting for. Tessa and Lucas had fought for their love every single day of their lives together. And they had won.